Magandang hapon sa lahat. I am Eugene E. Solia. You can call me Teacher Eugene. I am currently teaching elementary and high school science and health education courses at the University of the Philippines Integrated School. Today, we are talking about something that affects all of us, whether we notice it or not. And that is the heat crisis in Philippine cities. Kahit ngayong araw, palagay ko nasa loob kayo ng air-conditioned room, I am also someone who sweats with you in the same heat outside, complains about electric fans that feel like hair dryers, no? Mainit yung buga, lalo na sa loob ng classroom, and commutes to school or work, minsan sisiksikan na LRT or jeep. What we're going to learn today is not just about heat. We'll also try to touch on how it collides with the areas such as health, learning, livelihood, and our future. By the end of this talk, I hope we will be able to explain why the Philippines is so vulnerable and recognize the impacts of extreme heat. Although I'm doing this remotely, let's try to make this feel just like a normal conversation about our generation's future. Hopefully, before you go home today, I'd be able to share learning tidbits that will help you reflect on the issue and, of course, the possible solutions. To start, kindly look at these headlines from different organizations or institutions. Sabi dito, profound impacts. Record ocean heat is intensifying climate disasters. Sabi ng UN, extreme heat is breaking records worldwide. Sabi ng isa pa, extreme heat is changing the way we live. Sabi ng Center of Excellence for Climate and Disaster Resilience, extreme heat, a growing global challenge. Lastly, global heat crisis. 4 billion people face extreme temperatures due to climate change. These are definitely not exaggerations. These are from peer-reviewed articles and major news agencies. Heat waves are now killing people globally, just like storms and floods. But compared to floods and storms, heat is silent, tahimik, walang sirang building, walang pag-alog ng lupa, o malakas na ihip ng hangin. Pero it slowly damages our body and our society in different aspects. And if you think about it, that makes it more dangerous. Let's bring it closer to home. On the screen are Filipino posts. On the left, we're seeing news cards from different channels. Galing sa 2024, 2023, 2020. Iba-ibang year, pero iisa lang ang sinasabi. Mainit sa Pilipinas. Mataas ang heat index, lalo na kapag summer. On the right side, you will see random tweets from X or Twitter users. Sabi nung una, ang init. Tas yung Philippines na word nakapalibot sa apoy na emoji. Sabi nung next, guys, ayoko kayo magpanik kasi nararamdaman nyo naman na. Pero extra init po sa Metro Manila ngayon. Umabot ng 42 degrees Celsius, aka the answer to life, the universe, and everything, ang heat index ngayong 1:50 p.m. Sabi pa niya, ang heat index ay ang nararamdaman nating init. Lastly, sabi ng isa pang viral tweet with 18,000 hearts, why do I have expats in my mentions telling me that the heat wave in Southeast Asia is not that serious? Philippines suspended in-person classes. Laos permits it too. Thailand issued warnings of severe conditions. 40 degrees Celsius is being forecasted almost everywhere here. What are you talking about? Some of these are angry posts, obviously. Some are funny. And when humor becomes our way of surviving, it may mean that the problem is already serious. Knowing Filipinos, jokes are coping mechanisms. And this image is another example. This meme kind of says it all. Scientifically, we are not closer to the sun than the Earth or any other planet. But it feels that way. Physically, ang init, ang lagkit. Emotionally, nakakadala na rin na mainit, nakaka-frustrate, nakakagalit. Lalo na kapag wala kang aircon or wala kang magawa sa bahay. So the question is, if we are not closer to the sun, why are we getting hotter? Bakit mas umiinit sa Pilipinas? To answer that, we must understand how Earth handles solar energy. As we know, all life on Earth depends on the sun. The sun's energy keeps our planet warm. It releases enormous energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation, including the visible light that we see, the infrared light that we feel as heat, and ultraviolet or UV rays. What's amazing is this. Only about 1 over 2 billion of the sun's total energy actually reaches the Earth. Napakaliit na porsyento. Pero that tiny portion is powerful enough to drive our weather systems, ocean currents, plant growth, and ultimately all life. In short, the sun is the main reason our planet is warm and alive. And we like it. We should like it kasi kung walang araw, walang buhay, puro kadiliman. So sa Pilipinas, kahit tirik na tirik ang araw, ang dami-dami naman din kadiliman in other aspects. But anyway, as solar radiation enters the atmosphere, it doesn't just stay in one place. It follows several pathways inside our atmosphere and on the surface. And how Earth handles that incoming energy determines how hot our planet becomes. According to scientists from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration or NASA who study how energy moves in and out of our planet, yung Earth meron siyang parang budget, no? Yung Earth energy budget. Parang pera lang pero ang pinag-uusapan ay energy. Yung NASA meron silang programa na tinatawag na Clouds and the Earth's Radiant Energy System or CERES. Yung instruments from this program ang nagbibigay sa atin ng direktang sukat or measurements ng reflected solar radiation and emission of thermal infrared radiation to space across all wavelengths. And according to their data, 47% of sunlight is absorbed by land and oceans. Anong ibig sabihin ng 47% na ito? This energy warms the ground, heats the seas, evaporates water, and allows plants to grow through photosynthesis. Without this absorbed energy, Earth would be frozen and lifeless. Pero may catch. When land and water absorb more energy, they also release more heat back into the air. So the more energy we trap, the hotter our environment becomes. The next portion is the 23%. This one is the one absorbed by the atmosphere. So some sunlight is captured by gases, clouds, dust, and water vapor in the air. This energy warms the atmosphere itself, not just the ground. This is important because the atmosphere acts like a blanket or kumot na nakapalibot sa ating planeta. Later, I'll show you how this becomes part of a specific phenomenon. The last portion, the 30%, is reflected and scattered back to space. This includes sunlight bouncing off clouds, ice, snow, oceans, and even buildings or infrastructures. It's important to note that this reflected energy does not heat the Earth. Hindi niya pinapainit yung ating planeta. It is our planet's natural cooling system. So you can think of it this way para mas madali niyong tandaan. Absorbed energy equals warming. Reflected energy equals cooling. Now, the big question is, what happens when Earth reflects less sunlight and absorbs more? Anong mangyayari no, kapag mas kaunti yung sunlight na nare-reflect at mas dumadami or mas marami yung na-absorb. Siyempre, dito na magsisimula yung tinatawag nating global warming. So, i-dissect natin yung bawat porsyentong ito. Yung 47% na absorbed by land and sea, itong absorption happens when solar energy is taken in by a surface and converted into heat. Sa ating planeta, itong 47% ay absorbed by land and oceans or bodies of water. This absorbed energy warms the soil, as I mentioned a while ago, powers the water cycle or hydrologic cycle, and allows processes like photosynthesis. But land and water do not absorb and release heat the same way. Hindi sila magkapareho. Mas mabilis uminit ang lupa, ang land, kesa sa tubig. That's because of what we call the specific heat capacity, which simply means how much energy a substance needs before it becomes warmer. Water has a higher specific capacity than land. Ibig sabihin, it needs more energy to increase its temperature. Yung land, it needs less energy, kaya mas umiinit siya ng mabilis. Why does water behave this way? Bakit ganito yung tubig? It's because of its chemical structure, di ba? H2O. The hydrogen bonds between water molecules are very strong. It takes a lot of heat energy to break those bonds dahil malakas yung kanilang bond sa isa't isa. So water resists temperature change. At ito yung dahilan. Asphalt roads in Manila become extremely hot by noon. Yung kalupaan, yung kalsada sa Maynila, sa inyong mga tinitirhan, mas umiinit kapag tanghali. Pero kung mapapansin nyo, yung nearby ocean or sea stays cooler for a longer period of time. Here's another or an important connection to the heat crisis. When cities replace trees, soil, and water with concrete, metal, and asphalt, we replace low heating surfaces with fast heating surfaces. So urban areas absorb more heat, they heat up faster, and stay hot for a longer period of time. That is one major reason why cities feel much hotter than nearby provinces. Kasi mas maraming kalsada na konkreto, may asfalto, at yun yung nagbibigay ng mas mainit na pakiramdam para sa ating lahat. Yung 30% naman, kagayang nakita natin kanina, it is reflected and scattered to space. This includes, again, sunlight bouncing off clouds, ice, snow, oceans, and even bright surfaces like rooftops. Bakit kailangan natin itong pag-usapan? Because reflected sunlight does not heat the earth. The more sunlight we reflect, the cooler the surface stays. The less we reflect, the more heat we keep. So reflection is like Earth's natural sunscreen. Pero ito yung problema. When ice melts, forests are removed, and dark surfaces like asphalt increase, Earth reflects less sunlight and absorbs more heat. That means our planet starts to warm faster. Itong reflection, it is only half of the story. Even after sunlight warms the Earth, something else controls whether that heat escapes back to space. And that brings us to the concept that we call the greenhouse effect. In this phenomenon, some gases in our atmosphere like carbon dioxide and water vapor play a very special role. They don't block sunlight. Sunlight can pass through them easily and reach the earth. But when the earth warms up and releases heat back into the air, these gases catch that heat. They hold on to it and then send some of it back down toward the surface. So instead of all the heat escaping back into space, part of it stays with us, keeping our planet warmer. In simpler terms, they let heat in, but they slow heat from escaping. That's why we call it the greenhouse effect. It's just like a real greenhouse, as you can see in the picture. Sunlight enters, heat is trapped, plants stay warm even in cold seasons. Tandaan natin, the greenhouse effect is natural and necessary. Without it, Earth would be too cold for life. No, maninigas tayong lahat sa lamig. Now, another question that I would like to ask, can you name some of these greenhouse gases? Pwede yung sabihin dyan sa inyong kinalalagyan. Ano yung mga alam ninyong greenhouse gases? Okay, going once, going twice. So, yung mga greenhouse gases, some of the examples are water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and ozone. Saan ba nanggagaling itong mga gases na ito? Galing sila sa mga bulkan, volcanoes, oceans, animals. They also come from cars, factories, and even sa pagputol ng mga puno or gubat. Here's how the process works step by step. First, the sunlight reaches the earth and warms the surface as shown in the diagram. Second, the surface releases heat upward, papataas. Third, greenhouse gases absorb some of that heat and then they send part of it back down, pababa ulit. And that recycled heat keeps our planet warm and livable. So let me ask you, is the greenhouse effect good or bad? Tingin ninyo masama ba or mabuti itong greenhouse effect? Kung yes ang sagot, raise your hand. Okay, kung no, raise your hand. Okay. Actually, the answer is it is good, but in the right amount. It only becomes dangerous when we add too many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. When that happens, too much heat is trapped in our planet. And that is what we call global warming. And global warming is the main reason or driver of the heat crisis we are experiencing today. Now that we understood how heat is trapped in the atmosphere, let's look at what has actually happened to our planet over time. The graph on your screen shows the global surface temperature from 1880 to 2024 compared to the 20th century average. The blue bars represent cooler than average years, and the red bars show warmer than average years. Here's what we can notice from this illustration. On average, the Earth's temperature has risen by 0.11 degrees Fahrenheit per decade or 0.06 degrees Celsius. That may sound small, no, medyo maliit. But over 150 years, so imagine 150 years, that's roughly a 2 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.1 degrees Celsius increase overall or in total. Since the year 1982, the warming has accelerated more than 3 times. 1980s, during the Marcos administration, ito nangyari sa Pilipinas. The warming has accelerated more than 3 times at 0.36 degrees Fahrenheit per decade or 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. Think about it like this. 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade doesn't feel like much in a single year. Parang maliit lang. But imagine your classroom getting slightly warmer every 10 years. Eventually, it becomes noticeably uncomfortable. That's exactly what's happening to our planet. And the red bars here on the picture, they are getting taller. Diba? Mas tumataas sila. And not just taller, more frequent. That's a visual signal that extreme heat is becoming the new normal, not just a rare event. This is not an isolated case. So, from the natural greenhouse effect that keeps us alive, we've now moved into an era where extra greenhouse gases are pushing temperatures higher and higher and faster than ever before. Let's zoom in on 2024, which made history. Unfortunately, not for a good reason. 2024 was the warmest year on record since global temperature records began in 1850. That's more than 170 years of data. To give you numbers you can actually picture, it was 2.32 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.18 degrees Celsius warmer than the 20th century average of 57 degrees Fahrenheit or 13.9 degrees Celsius. Kung ikukumpara natin ito doon sa pre-industrial average or before humans burned fossil fuels on a massive scale, it was 2.62 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.35 degrees Celsius hotter. So mas mainit. And here's a really striking fact. The 10 warmest years in history have all happened in the past decade, from 2015 to 2024. So 2015, di ko alam kung ilang taon kayong niyan nung mga panahon na yan. Pero yan yung kasagsagan ng Aldab. No, yung sina Alden at si Yaya Dap sa Itbulaga. Freshie pa lang din ako niyan sa UP at nagsisimula pa lang i-figure out ang adulting. So that means, no, yung 2015 to 2024, that means the hottest years on record are not scattered randomly across history. Hindi siya watak-watak. They're actually happening now in our lifetime. So, medyo malas tayo sa bagay na ito dahil mainit sa panahon kung kailan tayo nabubuhay. This is not just a number on a chart as we've witnessed a while ago. Think about what this means for us here in the Philippines. Hotter summers, higher heat indices, more days when it feels unbearable just to be outside. Di ba yung maglakad lang sa labas? Kakaligo mo pa lang, haggard ka na agad. And more pressure, of course, on our health, energy, and food systems. On the next slide, we'll explore a visual map to see how this heat has spread across the globe and why it matters for us here in the Philippines. According to the 2023 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, the report tells us that human activities, mainly emissions of greenhouse gases, have clearly caused global warming. Between 2011 and 2020, the global surface temperature was already 1.1 degrees Celsius higher than in pre-industrial times or in 1850 to 1900. Now, here's the alarming part. If you compare the recent 30 years, 1994 to 2024, to the long-term trend, yung 1901 to 2024, the warming rate has accelerated dramatically. On the map shown in your screen, let me fix the presentation, this map, as you can see here, over the past 3 decades, many places in the northern hemisphere have warmed by more than 1 degrees Fahrenheit per decade. But the biggest changes are actually happening in the Arctic regions, where melting ice and snow mean the ground reflects less sunlight. On the map, you'll see colors. Let's go back to the map. You'll see colors on the map. Blue, places that cooled Yellow, orange, and red places that warm. That means less reflection equals more heat and faster warming. Okay, so again, less reflection equals more heat absorbed equals faster warming. This is called a feedback loop, and it's making global warming even worse. So not only are we getting hotter, some places are heating much faster than the world average. And this affects weather patterns, may mga bagyo, sea levels, and ecosystems everywhere, including here in the Philippines. All right, let's take a little break from numbers and play a game called Two Truths and a Lie. I'm going to give you three statements about heat, temperature, and heat index. Your job is to guess which one is the lie. This will help us understand why extreme temperatures are so dangerous here in the Philippines. So get ready. I will be asking the audience to raise your hand for your answer. So please participate. No judgment naman. So kung magkamali at least, di ba, you learn the correct answer. Pero madali lang naman yung aking mga ipapakitang statements. For the first batch of statements, statement 1, temperature tells how hot or cold the air is. Statement 2, heat index shows how hot it feels using temperature and humidity. Statement 3, extreme heat is only dangerous at 45 degrees Celsius and above. So class, which one do you think is the lie? Alin kaya dito yung mali? Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay. If you think statement 1 is the lie, please raise your hand. Okay. How about statement 2? Raise your hand. Okay. And if you think it's statement 3, that is the lie, please raise your hand. Okay. So let's see the correct answer. Statement 3 is actually the false statement. Extreme heat is only dangerous at 45 degrees Celsius and above. Even if the thermometer says 36 degrees Celsius or lower, it can feel like 42 degrees Celsius in a humid city like Manila, Quezon City, Marikina, and that's risky for health. Okay, so hindi lang kapag 45 degrees Celsius pataas natin masasabi na delikado ang init ng araw. So palakpakan naman natin ang mga nakatama ng sagot. Good job. Next batch of statement. Statement 1, extreme temperatures affect crops, animals, and power systems. Statement 2, wind speed is the main factor in heat index. And statement 3, humidity raises the heat index. Okay. Who says it's statement 1? Raise your hand. Okay, who says it's statement 2? Raise your hand. Sige, and who says it's statement 3? Raise your hand, please. Okay, so sa mga hindi nag-raise ng hand, bawi kayo pag may activity pa bukas sa next na portion of the program. Pero for this batch, the lie is the second statement. Wind speed is the main factor in heat index. High humidity makes it harder for our sweat to evaporate. So our bodies can cool down. Hence, wind speed matters for wind chill. So that's when it feels colder than the actual temperature. But wind speed does not matter for the heat index. Extreme heat isn't just about humans. No, itong mataas na heat index, hindi lang niya naapektuhan yung mga tao. It also affects plants, animals, as well as the electricity systems, no, powering our appliances. So I want you to remember these concepts. Let's make sure that we all understand the basic terms. So when we say temperature, it represents the average kinetic energy of the atoms in a substance as they vibrate and collide. Basically, temperature is how hot the air is. Think of it like checking the thermometer in your classroom, no? Kung meron kayong wall thermometer. The heat index is a calculated measure that combines air temperature and humidity to represent how hot it feels to the human body. While heat is a transfer of thermal energy from one body to another due to a temperature difference. So in a nutshell, heat index is how hot it feels to your body. Imagine walking under the noon sun, no, yung tirik na araw, while wearing a uniform or a jacket, a sweater. Even if it says 33 degrees Celsius in your application, in your smartphones, you might feel like 38 degrees Celsius or higher because of humidity. So when there's extreme heat, no, ang ibig sabihin nun, when the heat index reaches a level that can be dangerous for health, like causing heat cramps, heat exhaustion, or even heat stroke. So remember, temperature is what the thermometer says. Heat index is what your body actually feels. And extreme heat is when it becomes unsafe. And that's something that we deal with every summer or kahit hindi nga summer, di ba? Mainit pa rin sa Pilipinas. In the Philippines, humidity is very high. So when we sweat, the sweat cannot evaporate properly. So our body cannot cool down. In our country, humidity is very high, especially in cities like Manila, Cebu, and Davao. No, yung mga very urbanized na cities, maraming buildings. As mentioned, when it's humid, your sweat does not evaporate easily. And if sweat cannot evaporate, your body cannot cool itself down properly. Think about this so that you can imagine better. Last April, some news agencies reported that parts of Metro Manila were feeling like 42 degrees Celsius, even though the thermometer says 36 degrees Celsius. So that's the heat index at work. Outdoor vendors, no, yung mga nagtitinda ng gulay sa labas, taho, balot, um, at iba-iba pang street food, jeepney drivers, kayong mga estudyante na nagko-commute, naglalakad sa kalsada, waiting for buses, we often feel this extreme heat. Some even get dizzy, may mga nahihimatay pa nga, may mga nade-dehydrate because our bodies are struggling, no, to cope. Because of this, the Philippines is considered a tropical hotspot. We not only experience high temperatures, but also high humidity almost year-round, no, almost buong taon. Combine this, no, yung high temperature, high humidity, and the risk of heat illnesses goes up dramatically. That's why when the news talks about a heat advisory, it's not just about the number on the thermometer. It's about how our bodies actually experience the heat. Let's also talk about how the Philippines ranked the third most vulnerable to climate change according to the 2017 World Risk Report. No, napakataas no, no rank 3. Bakit kaya ito nangyayari? Scientific studies tell us that our planet has been warming since the mid-20th century. And most of this warming is caused by human activities. Things like burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, and changing land use. These activities increase the amount of the greenhouse gases that we discussed a while ago, in the atmosphere, which trap more heat and make our planet warmer. Looking at this graph on your screen, we can see that from 1951 to 2010, the average temperatures in the Philippines have increased by about 0.65 degrees Celsius or roughly 0.01 degrees Celsius per year. That may not sound like much. No? Parang maliit na naman no, yung numero. Pero tandaan natin, even small changes in average temperature can make extreme heat events more common and more intense. Moreover, look at the daytime and nighttime temperatures. Maximum temperatures, that's how hot it gets during the day or daytime temperature. Itong maximum temperatures have increased by 0.36 degrees Celsius over the last 60 years. While the minimum temperatures or how warm it stays at night, no, nighttime temperature, have increased by 1.0 degrees Celsius. Bakit mahalagang pag-usapan natin ito? Even if daytime temperatures don't seem drastically higher, warmer nights mean our bodies don't get a chance to cool down. Yun na nga lang yung panahon, di ba, na makakatulog tayo, makakapag-relax sa bed, tapos mainit pa. So this adds stress to our health, increases heat-related illness, and even affects our sleep. Kasi pag mainit, syempre, hindi komportable yung ating pagtulog. Also, warmer nights can impact agriculture and ecosystems. As we mentioned a while ago, apektado rin ang halaman at mga hayop. Dahil plants and animals rely on natural temperature cycles. For example, rice, corn, or cornfields may suffer if nights stay too warm. Ito yung mga halaman. Magsasuffer or malalanta. And some fish and wildlife may struggle to survive with these temperatures. It's also important, no, in relation to this, to look into the details about deforestation in the Philippines. Forests, as we know, are like the Earth's natural air conditioners. They absorb heat, release moisture, and keep surrounding areas cooler. But in the Philippines, we are losing about 47,000 hectares of forest every year. To give you some perspective, in 2003, we had 7.2 million hectares of forest. But by 2010, just 7 years after, that dropped to 6.8 million hectares, which is almost 5% loss in just 7 years. If we go back to the 1900s, we now have less than a quarter of our original forest cover. Less forest means less shade and cooling, especially in rural and urban areas. More heat absorption by bare land, which warms the surrounding air, so mas mainit. And of course, kapag konti yung mga puno, mas tataas yung greenhouse gases. Kasi yung mga puno, they absorb carbon dioxide. In cities, this problem gets worse because of the urban heat island effect. Ito ay nangyayari, no, yung tinatawag nating urban heat island effect when buildings, roads, and concrete absorb heat during the day and release it at night. Nag-iipon ng init sa umaga, ilalabas sa gabi. Cities can be 3 to 7 degrees hotter than surrounding rural areas. And so, deforestation and urbanization are like double trouble. Both make our environment hotter and more uncomfortable, especially in a tropical country like ours. Let's also acknowledge how heat and water are closely connected. When temperature rises, evaporation increases, rivers and reservoirs shrink, and our water supply becomes stressed. For example, in 2019, Manila experienced one of its worst water shortages in decades, affecting millions of people. This wasn't just because of low rainfall. Higher temperatures made the problem worse by driving up sources faster and increasing demand. Water shortages combined with extreme heat increase the risk of heat illnesses like dehydration, impact agriculture, which reduces our rice supply, as well as vegetables and fruits. Yung water shortage may also affect daily life. Wala tayong makakain bago pumasok sa eskwela, sa trabaho. Hindi tayo makakaligo, so mabaho. So heat doesn't just make us sweaty and tired. It directly affects our access to water, which is essential for brushing your teeth or for survival in general. And so extreme heat impacts all people, no? Mayaman, mahirap, lahat natatamaan ng kainitan. We need to understand that the human body is thermally delicate. No, it can be really dangerous for us to go outside when there's extreme heat. Our bodies are designed to operate around 37 degrees Celsius or 98 degrees Fahrenheit. When it gets hotter than that, our bodies have to work extra to cool down. Think about this. Imagine you're in a school classroom in Manila at 34 degrees Celsius with no air conditioning, fans barely moving. Sa UPIS may fans na umiikot pero hindi umiikot yung LEC. And humidity so high that even sweat doesn't dry. Tapos 50 pa kayo sa loob ng classroom. Your body is trying to cool itself, but it's struggling. Sinusubukan pero nahihirapan. That's heat stress in action. Without proper hydration or medical help, extreme heat can damage organs, cause heat stroke, or even become life-threatening. Some people are more vulnerable than others. Younger students or older adults, because their bodies cannot adapt quickly, people who are already sick or undernourished, and of course, those in areas without access to cool spaces. And it's not just about health. Heat affects our daily life and learning. Studies have shown that when it's extremely hot, students have trouble concentrating in class. They have trouble focusing and are more likely to skip school. Essentially or eventually, they will also perform worse on tests because their brains overheat, just like our bodies. So next time, pag may nag-complain or nag-complain ka about heat or sobrang init, remember that your body is literally working overtime to survive that. Likewise, natural ecosystems have thermal limits. Hindi lang mga tao. Humans are not the only ones suffering from this heat crisis. Meaning yung plants, they can also only survive within certain temperature ranges. In the Philippines, which is the third most vulnerable country to climate change, we're already seeing the consequences. Okay, ano ba yung mga consequences na ito? Una, by 2050, 98% of Southeast Asia's coral reefs could die if warming continues. Yung coral reefs, bahay yan ng maraming fish species. And without them, fisheries collapse and communities depending on fish will lose their livelihood. Next, apektado rin yung rice and crops. According to research, for every 1 degree Celsius increase in minimum growing season temperature, rice yields drop by at least 10%. This will definitely affect food security and prices. So, tataas na naman yung presyo ng bilihin. Nandiyan din yung droughts and El Nino. Extreme heat worsens droughts. For example, in 2015 to 2016, more than 400,000 Filipino farmers were directly affected by El Nino-induced droughts or katuyuan. Also, sea level rise. Sea levels are rising 60 centimeters in the Philippines, about 3 times the global average, so mas mabilis. This puts 60% of LGUs or local government units, 800 municipalities, 25 cities, and over 13 million people at risk of relocation, lalo na yung malalapit sa karagatan. Labor and economy is also affected by the intense heat. Extreme heat reduces labor productivity up to 4% loss in working hours by 2085 according to projections kung walang magbabago. Also, public health is greatly affected. Hotter temperatures increase the spread of diseases. Ano ba yung mga sakit na yan? Kagaya ng dengue, cholera, malaria, and typhoid. For instance, during the strongest El Nino in the Philippines in 1998, the country saw almost 40,000 cases of dengue. So as you can see, extreme heat doesn't just make us sweat. No, hindi lang yun pampapawis. It disrupts the food we eat, the water we drink, our work, and even our communities. Essentially, our whole life. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. Extreme heat doesn't just make us uncomfortable. No, it affects almost every part of our lives. As mentioned, your health, it struggles to cope, your education, you struggle to go to school, to focus, the labor and the economy, the loss of productivity, ecosystems and environment, be it aquatic or sa lupa. And so the Philippine Red Cross Heat Action Day reminds everyone about how to stay safe during extreme heat. No, simple ways like drinking water, seeking shade, avoiding strenuous activity, and checking on neighbors. It's because extreme heat is not just a personal problem, it's a societal one. It touches our health, our education, our economy, and our environment. And the way we respond today will shape how vulnerable or resilient we are in the upcoming days or years. If these seem overwhelming, it gets more overwhelming when we look at future projections. Based on data from Pag-asa, the following are likely to happen years from now. All areas of the Philippines will get warmer, especially during summer months. Mean temperatures projected to rise plus 0.9 degrees Celsius to 1.1 degrees Celsius by 2020 and plus 1.8 degrees Celsius to 2.2 degrees Celsius by 2050. Seasonal mean temperatures will increase consistently as well across all 4 seasons nationwide. Largest temperature rise expected in summer season. Hot days will become more frequent in the future, and days exceeding 35 degrees Celsius are projected to increase in both 2020 na naranasan na natin and 2050, okay? 24 years from now. These are not just predictions. They are very likely to happen if no serious action is taken. The hotter days, the higher the risk for heat illnesses, agricultural failures, and even power shortages. That's why our actions today matter. And here are some ways forward. No, we've seen how extreme heat affects our bodies, our well-being, and the environment. But we must remember that we are not powerless. There are solutions, and they need to be big and collective. So yung una na dyan, let's confront the root causes. Extreme heat is not just caused by the sun. It is made worse by poverty, inequality, and environmental destruction. When forests are cut, we lose our natural cooling system. When communities lack water, electricity, or shade, heat becomes deadlier. When poor areas are ignored in planning, heat becomes a social injustice. So confronting extreme heat means confronting the systems that created vulnerability. And therefore, the second one is that we need to think systematically, specifically across sectors. The heat crisis doesn't affect everyone in the same way. It intersects with health, poverty, location, age, gender, disability, and access to resources. That is what we mean by intersectionality. Different social conditions overlap and shape how strongly people are affected. Heat is not just a weather problem. As mentioned, it is a justice issue. For example, a student in an air-conditioned classroom experiences heat differently from a student in a crowded and poorly ventilated school. Another example, a family with stable income can afford air conditioning, water, and healthcare. Others cannot. Coastal communities furthermore face heat and flooding. Farmers also face heat and food insecurity, kahit sila mismo yung nagtatanim. That's why solutions must be systemic and intersectional. We must protect the most vulnerable first. So our solutions must connect schools with greener infrastructure, farmers with more climate resilient support, hospitals with heat response systems, and communities with safe public cooling spaces. Climate action should not ignore inequality so that we can protect everyone. The third point is that we must support decision makers with science and action. To solve the heat crisis, we don't just need opinions. We need good science, good data, and good cooperation among us. Scientists study the problem, obviously. Policymakers create plans. Communities experience the impact. And students like you, like us, can help connect all three. We can support decision makers or policy makers by collecting and sharing our local data. Kung may mga nakikita kayo sa barangay ninyo, using research to explain what is happening in your own neighborhoods, proposing solutions that are practical, fair, and evidence-based. And so when science guides policy and when communities are part of the conversation, decisions become stronger, smarter, more humane, and consultative. Ang goal naman natin dito not to attack leaders. Diba? The goal is to help them see more clearly, decide better, and act faster with the support of research and the voice of the youth. And lastly, we need to advocate. No? Youth activism is important in our everyday lives. Cleanups, recycling, and tree planting are good, and we should still do them. Diba? Wala namang question dyan. But we also need to be honest. These actions often place the burden on individuals, while the biggest damage is done by larger systems and powerful corporations or institutions. We students are told to recycle plastic while industries continue to produce massive amounts of plastic. Communities are told to clean rivers while corporations and weak policies allow pollution to continue upstream. We are told to save electricity while energy systems still depend heavily on fossil fuels. So yes, di ba walang duda, we act responsibly as individuals, but, big but, we must also demand responsibility from those with greater power and influence. Real change happens when personal action is combined with systemic accountability. Better laws, better urban planning, better energy systems, and leaders who prioritize people over profit. It's because the heat crisis is not just caused by careless individuals, no? Yung mga hindi disiplinadong individual, it is sustained by broken systems. And as young people, your role is not only to help clean the mess, but to also help change the rules that keep creating the cycle. And research is one opportunity or avenue where we can do this. As young scientists and future leaders, you have a unique opportunity to tackle the heat crisis in ways that matter to your own schools or communities. Here are some areas or topic that you may want to explore. First is the urban heat island effect, especially in cities like Manila, Cebu, and Davao. You could measure temperatures in different neighborhoods and compare them to greener areas. That brings us to city planning and materials, where you can investigate how building materials, roofing, and roads trap heat. Ito bang green roofs, yung mga reflective surfaces, or mas maraming puno, could they help keep neighborhoods cooler? Your research can guide smarter city designs. There are also researches that you can do in terms of health impacts of extreme heat. So pwede yung tignan how urban heat affects people's health. No, yung heat exhaustion, sleep disruption, or even school performance. You could also look into nature-based solutions, no, explore ways to reduce heat using nature, like planting urban forests, community gardens, or mangroves. Coastal ecosystems and sea level rise also deserve attention. So you could study the effect of heat and climate change on mangroves, coral reefs, and coastal fisheries. How are local livelihoods, no, yung mga mangingisda, paano sila naapektuhan? And with the current system that we have, can communities adapt to protect both people and nature? Nandiyan din yung infrastructure and resilience, of course, disaster resilience. Examine the vulnerability of bridges, ports, and other critical infrastructures to rising seas and extreme heat. Could design changes, early warning systems, or protective measures help save lives and resources? So by studying these areas firsthand, we can gain valuable scientific skills and create solutions for your family, for your communities, and for the country, for us to better adapt to the heat crisis. So to end, I would like to impart to everyone that the heat crisis is personal and political. It affects us, our families, our communities. Its impacts are made worse by systems that fail to protect the vulnerable sectors, by cities designed without care, and by choices that prioritize short-term gains over long-term survival. But again, as we've learned a while ago, we are not powerless. Understanding the problem is the first step, like what we're doing now, and acting together eventually is a way to reclaim our future. Hopefully, you learned something from our discussion today, and sana makatulong yung mga ibinahagi ko sa inyo ngayong araw para sa mga susunod ninyong gagawin sa programa ng UP ALCHEMES. Maraming maraming salamat para sa mga katanungan or inquiry, suggestions, points for improvement. You may send them all to eesolia@up.edu.ph. Again, that's eesolia@up.edu.ph. Maraming salamat at ingat palagi.